I had kicked in a lot of doors in 15 years, and I had learned to read a building the way some men read weather. This one told me nothing good. The Kessel station sat at the head of the Dovrith Valley like a fist closed around a stone. It had been a waterworks once back when the Highlands still ran power down to the lowland towns. A walled compound of gray block and rusted sluice gates, two squat towers, a control house with slit windows a man could shoot from and you could not shoot back into. Whoever built it had built it to hold water against a mountain. That meant it held men against us just as well. 3 days we had sat on it. 3 days of cold that got into the plates of your carrier and stayed there, of glassing the same wall through the same optic, until the mortar joints burned themselves onto the back of my eyes. Inside were 9 engineers, aid workers, water people, the kind who came up into country like this to make a dead valley drink again. Somewhere in the night 4 days back, a local faction had walked in through a gate that should have been locked and taken the whole station, hostages and all, and now they stood on the towers with old rifles and new confidence, and waited for us to do something stupid. We wanted to. God help us, my men and I wanted to go through that wall so badly our teeth ached. That is the disease of the assault element. You spend your whole life training to be the answer, and when someone hands you a problem that will not open to a breaching charge, it feels like an insult against your body. Captain Hollies, that was Sergeant Doss beside me, low, chin toward the control house. They moved the sentry on the north tower again, same window, hour off. I see him. Third rotation like that. I see him, Doss. I did not see what he was pointing at, is the honest truth of it, and I would think about that a great deal later. I saw a man in a window. I did not see the hour off. I did not see the shape it made when you laid 3 days of hours off side by side. It takes a certain kind of mind to see a shape in time, and I did not have it, and I did not yet know I was standing 40 feet from someone who did. The command post was a farmhouse a click back down the valley, its roof half gone, its main room strung with cable and the blue light of screens. Colonel Reeve ran it the way he ran everything, with his sleeves down and his voice flat, and a habit of tapping one knuckle on the map table when he wanted a thing to be true. He wanted the breach. He had wanted it since hour 6. Hire wanted the hostages out before a 4th. Sunrise turned this into the kind of story that got read aloud in rooms with flags in them. And a breach is a thing you can put in a slide. Give me the north wall, Reeve said, to no one and to all of us. 1 charge, 2 teams were inside before they've cleared their throats. And the hostages, said the intel warrant quietly, are in the control house 40 meters past the wall, behind men who will hear the charge. So we're fast. Sir, nobody is that fast. Reeve tapped his knuckle. Tap, tap. It was in that silence, with the whole room leaning toward a plan that would fill body bags, that the door opened and let the cold in, and a woman I had never seen walked into the light. I want to be fair to myself, so I will tell you exactly what I thought because it is the ugliest and truest thing in this account. I thought scenery. She was maybe 35, dark hair pulled back hard, in a plain uniform without a unit patch I recognized and without the wear I trusted. No dust on her. No dried anything on her. She had come from somewhere with heat and coffee, and every man in that room who had bled the last 3 days into the mud read that clean uniform as a verdict on her worth. She carried a slim case and a tablet and the calm of a person walking into a meeting, not a siege. Captain Marsh, she said, liaison element I'm red on. Somebody in the back of the room laughed, not loud, just enough. Reeve looked at her the way you look at whether you did not order. Liaison, he repeated. They sent me a liaison. They sent you what you asked for, she said, even and me. That earned a couple of grins, and I confess I grinned too, because I was tired and afraid, and it is easier to laugh at a clean uniform than to laugh at a stone wall. She set her case on the end of the map table, the far end, the scrap end, where the coffee rings were, and she did not ask for a chair, and nobody offered one. She's just another pretty face they sent up to make the brief look staffed, Das murmured to me, not unkindly, the way you'd note the weather. Watch, she'll take notes and fly home. I nodded. I believed him. I believed him completely. And Captain Marsh stood at the scrap end of the table in her clean uniform, and she did not take a single note. She looked at the compound on the map. Then she looked, for a long time, at nothing, at the middle distance, at the air over the plywood, the way a man looks at a chessboard 3 moves after he has stopped seeing the pieces. Nobody watched her do it. I only know she did it because I have gone back over that night 1,000 times, and it is the first thing I got wrong. Reeve turned back to his knuckle and his wall. North charge, 2 teams. Hollies, your element leads. Yes, sir. My blood came up warm at that, finally. We go at 0400. Sir, the voice came from the scrap end of the table, level, unhurried. Reeve did not look up. The liaison has a question. Not a question, Marsh said. A number. If you charge the north wall at 0400, you'll lose the hostages in the control house before your second team is through the gap. I put it around 80% that all 9 are dead within 90 seconds of the charge. I wanted that on the record before you decided. The room went still in the particular way a room goes still. When someone says a true thing, everyone was working hard not to say. Reeve set both hands on the table. And you know this how, Captain? Because they've rehearsed it, she said. The men in the towers, they've walked the hostage consolidation drill twice a day for 3 days, always 90 minutes after the light changes. You've been watching their sentries. I've been watching what they do when they think no one's watching the sentries. She did not raise her voice. She did not lean in. They are not defending the wall. They are guarding a plan, and your charge triggers it. You've been here 4 minutes. I've been read on for 11 hours, she said. I read the feeds on the flight. Reeve straightened. And here is the thing I understood only much later. He was not angry that she was wrong. He was angry because some part of him knew she was right, and being handed the truth by the clean uniform at the scrap end of the table was more than his 3 exhausted days could bear. Thank you, Captain, he said in the voice that means the opposite. We'll take it under advisement. Hollies, 0400, brief your teams. I said yes, sir, and I meant it, and I walked past her on my way out. She was still looking at the middle distance. I remember thinking, with the cheap certainty of a man who has never in his life been the smartest person in a room, that she would be gone by breakfast. I gathered my teams in the barn and I laid the north charge on them, and Das ran the timing, and we rehearsed the gap and the flow and the room by room the way we always did, clean and hard and beautiful, and every man in that barn believed in it the way you believe in a thing you have done 100 times. Nobody in that barn had walked the hostage consolidation drill twice a day for 3 days. Nobody in that barn had seen the shape a thing makes when you lay its hours side by side. Around 2 in the morning, I went back up to the line to glass the wall one more time, because a good assault commander looks at the ground until his eyes bleed, and I found her there. Captain Marsh, prone in the cold at the edge of our forward hide, no plates, no rifle, just the slim case open beside her and a spotting scope on a low tripod, and a notebook full of tiny handwriting, watching the North Tower the way I have only ever seen 2 or 3 men in my life watch anything, not hunting for a target but reading, cataloging, building something behind her eyes I could not see. You're going to freeze up here without kit, Captain, I said, because I am not a cruel man, only a stupid one. The sentry on the North Tower, she said, not turning, steps back from the window for 4 minutes at the top of every hour, not to rest. He's checking on someone below him inside, someone he doesn't trust to leave alone. She made a small mark in the notebook. 3 days, that man, same 4 minutes. He is the most frightened person in that compound, Captain, and he is holding the door you actually want. I looked through my optic at the man in the window. I saw a man in a window. You've decided I'm scenery, she said, still not turning, no heat in it at all. That's all right. It's useful sometimes being scenery. People do their real work in front of scenery. She capped her pen. "Go run your breach, Captain Hollies. I'll be here when it doesn't work." I did not have an answer for that. I went and ran my breach. At 0340 we were stacked in the dark against the cold shoulder of the north wall, and everything was as beautiful as it always was. 12 men breathing slow. The charge set and checked again. Doss's hand flat on my shoulder, mine flat on the man ahead. The valley held its breath around us. Above, the stars were the hard, clean stars you only get at altitude. And I remember thinking that it was a good night to be very good at the one thing I was good at. I keyed the net. "Command Assault 1, set, ready your call." A pause, then reeve tight. "Assault 1 command, hold." "Say again, hold." "Hold, Hollies." And then, further from the mic, the flat scrape of an argument. I could only hear the edges of Reeves' voice, and under it a second voice, level and unhurried, saying a number. I pressed my forehead against the cold block of the wall, and I hated that voice with the pure, clean hatred of a man who wants to move and is told to wait. 80%, she'd said. All 9 dead in 90 seconds. I did not believe her. I could not afford to believe her, because if she was right, then everything I was good at was the wrong tool, and there is no lonelier thought for a man on a wall in the dark. "Assault 1, Reeve came back, and I could hear what it cost him. "New guidance, we're not charging the north wall." Something in my chest fell a long way. "Command, say your intent." "My intent," Reeve said, "is to send a 2-man element to the south sluice to establish a closer eye before we commit. Confirm one thing the liaison flagged. Fast in, fast out, no contact." It was a compromise. I know that now, a colonel splitting the difference between the plan he wanted and the number he could not unhear, giving the planner a little and the assaulter a little and the situation nothing. Compromises like that are how good men get killed. But at the time it just felt like being made to wait, so I said, "Roger, tasking Rays and Keto." And I sent 2 of my best down the black length of the south wall to the old sluice gate, and I told myself it was nothing, a look, a peek, home for coffee. They were 40 meters from the sluice when the light hit them. Not a searchlight, a lantern, swung up in a window we hadn't flagged. A window Marsh had not been watching because Marsh had been pulled off the line to argue in the command post, and there is a lesson in that I have never gotten over. The men inside were more awake than we'd credited. Rays went flat and Keto went flat, and the first shots came down off the south tower in a long, ugly rip, and the beautiful quiet valley turned into noise and muzzle flash, and my 2 men pinned in a ditch under a wall with the whole compound waking up above them. I do not remember giving the order to move. I remember being up and running the length of the wall with half my element behind me, and I remember the net stacking full of voices, and I remember Reeves shouting for a status, and under all of it, threading through the chaos calm as a heartbeat, a woman's voice on the command channel saying, "Assault 1, do not send more men to the south wall. They want you at the south wall. Break contact left, pull your 2 back along the dead ground under the sluice pipe. There's a 2-foot lip. It's covered from the tower, Hollies the pipe, use the pipe." I did not decide to trust her. There was no time to decide anything. I just heard the pipe and I looked, and there was a pipe, a great rusted sluice main half buried along the base of the wall, and there was a lip of dead ground under it exactly where she said, and I put my men into it and I dragged Rays by his carrier into the shadow of it, and the rounds walked over the top of the pipe where our heads would have been. We came off that wall bloody. Keto took a round through the meat of the calf, and Rays had his bell rung hard by a chip of stone, and if we had gone another 10 meters into the open the way every instinct in my body was screaming to, we would have carried 2 men home under flags. We didn't, because a voice I hated told me about a pipe. Back at the command post it was very quiet. Reeves stood over the map with his knuckles still for once. Keto was getting his leg wrapped in the corner and swearing softly, alive to swear. And Captain Marsh stood at the scrap end of the table exactly where she had stood all night, and she was not gloating, and she was not vindicated, and she was not anything. She was looking at the map. They read our probe before we moved, she said to the room, not to Reeve. Which means they have someone with a good eye on the south approach, which is the third thing tonight that tells me the same story. She set one fingertip on the control house. There are two minds in that compound. One is defending, one is planning. The planner put the lantern in the window to pull your assault south, away from the control house, away from the hostages. He's good. A small pause. He's better than your plan, sir. He is not better than mine. Reeve looked at her for a long moment. Around the room, men who had grinned at her 12 hours ago were not grinning now. I was not grinning. I was standing there with another man's blood drying tacky on my sleeve, doing the hardest arithmetic of my career, which was the arithmetic of admitting that the clean uniform at the scrap end of the table had just kept two of my men alive, while my beautiful breech had nearly buried them. Captain Marsh, Reeve said at last, and something had changed in how he said the name. Come up to the table. She came up to the table. Somebody, I don't remember who, pulled out the good chair, the one at the map, the one that had been Reeve's, and she did not take it. She took the plain one beside it and turned it to face the compound, and she sat, and she opened her slim case, and for the first time all night the whole room leaned toward her instead of away. Before you brief, Reeve said, and to his credit he said it in front of everyone, which is the only apology a colonel knows how to make. I owe you a question I should have asked at the door. Who am I actually talking to? She didn't answer right away. She was laying photographs out of her case, overhead prints of the Kessel station, but old ones from when it was a working waterworks, engineering schematics gone soft and brown at the folds. You're talking to a liaison, she said. That's what my orders say, and that's the door I walked through, and it suited me fine to walk through it that way because the work I do goes better when the room isn't watching me do it. She smoothed a schematic flat. But since you asked, before this I spent 6 years doing one job. I planned the end of sieges, the ones you don't hear about, the ones that end with everybody walking out. The warrant beside me went very still. How many? He said. Marsh looked up. 11, she said. 11 standoffs, ended without a breach, without losing a hostage. She said it the way you'd report the weather, no weight on it at all, which is how you know a thing is true. The people I work with have a call sign for the planner who runs the net on those. They call the position keystone, the stone in the arch that holds the whole thing up. A faint, tired, almost smile. For 6 years, that was me. Nobody said anything. Quito had stopped swearing in the corner. The blue screen light hummed. And I stood there and felt the whole shape of the night rearrange itself behind my eyes, the sentry, the hours off, the 4 minutes at the top of the hour, the frightened man holding the door, the lantern in the window, the pipe. All of it not scattered detail, but a single thing she had been reading the way I read a building, the way I read weather, except she was reading the war itself, and she had been reading it since before she took her coat off. You knew about the pipe, I heard myself say. My own voice sounded strange to me. The sluice main. You knew it was there, and you knew the lip was covered before my men were ever on that wall. I read the station's construction schematics on the flight up, she said, and touched the soft brown print in front of her. It was a waterworks, Captain. Waterworks are the most legible buildings on Earth if you know how water thinks. Every drain, every overflow, every dead space, they're all drawn because water has to be told where to go. She turned the schematic so I could see it. The men inside are living in a machine built to move water, and they don't know how it thinks. I do. That's the whole advantage. That's the only advantage. It's enough. Reeve pulled the plain chair around to sit beside her, colonel and liaison at the same low corner of the table, and he said the words that cost him the most of anything he said that night. All right, Keystone, he said. Tell me how this ends with everyone walking out. She told us how it ends. Not fast, and not with drama. She turned the old waterworks schematic so the whole leaning room could see it, and she began to teach us the building the way she'd learned it, the way water learns a thing, by finding every low place and every dead end. There was a lecture in it, but it did not feel like a lecture. It felt like watching someone hand you the answer to a riddle you'd been dying against for 3 days. Everything you've been looking at is the wrong layer, she said. You've been reading the walls and the towers, the fighting positions. That's the layer they want you in, because that's the layer where their rifles matter and your assault dies in a hallway. Underneath it is a second building. She traced a line under the compound, a channel drawn in faded engineer's ink. The station drew its water off the Valley River, ran it through settling tanks in the basement of the control house, and pushed the overflow out through a gravity culvert that daylights below the south wall. The culvert is 1.5 meters at the crown. It's been dry for years. It runs from the tree line straight into the room directly under the hostages. Das leaned in despite himself. You want to put a team up a drain pipe? No, Marsh said. I want them to think I want to put a team up a drain pipe. There's a difference, and the difference is the whole plan. She set 2 fingers on the culvert mouth. Here's what the planner in there knows. He knows the culvert exists, he's smart, he's read his own building. So he's got it covered, or he thinks he does. And he knows that a force like yours, once it finds a covered way in, cannot resist using it. He's counting on your appetite, Captain Hollies. She looked at me, not unkindly. The whole faction is counting on the fact that men trained to breach cannot bear to wait. It's the only card they've got left, and it's a good one, because it's usually true. I felt that land in the middle of my chest. It was true. I had spent the whole night proving it true. So we don't feed the appetite, she went on. We feed the fear. There's a difference between the 2 men holding that compound, and I've spent 3 days finding the seam between them. The sentry on the north tower, the one who steps back 4 minutes every hour, he's the planner's man, and he is coming apart. He checks on someone below him because he's holding the door to the room where they keep the engineers, and he did not sign up to shoot engineers, and every hour that passes without us breaching is an hour he has to sit alone with that math. The planner is winning the standoff, but the planner is losing his own sentry, 1 hour at a time, and he doesn't see it because he's watching us. Reeves said slowly, you want to run the clock on their own man. I want to give their own man a door, she said. That's all a good siege ever is. You don't break the wall. You find the one person inside who is already looking for a way out, and you make sure that when he turns around, there's a door where he needs one to be. Then she laid the whole thing out, and I'm not going to pretend I followed every wire of it the first time, because it was the most intricate piece of work I have ever stood next to. But the spine of it was this. We would make a great deal of visible, clumsy, appetite-driven noise at the South Culvert, engineers and cutting gear, and the unmistakable choreography of an assault element preparing to come up the drain. We would let the planner see exactly the breach he was counting on us to attempt. We would let him move his good men, his committed men, south to cover the culvert and kill us in it. And that would strip the North Tower down to 1 frightened sentry and the room he was guarding. While every eye in that compound is on the drain, Marsh said, I open a different door, not with a charge, with a radio. She tapped the North Tower. For 3 days that sentry has watched us not come. Tonight he watches his own planner send everyone south and leave him alone with 9 people he doesn't want to hurt. And at that exact moment, not before, the timing is the entire plan. He gets a call on a frequency I've watched them use, in his own language, from a voice that tells him the one thing a frightened man 3 days into the worst decision of his life is desperate to hear. That there's a way for him and the engineers to walk out of this alive, and that the way closes in 4 minutes, and that it's the 4 minutes he already steps back from the window for, every hour like clockwork, because some part of him has been rehearsing this door without knowing it. The room was dead silent. You've been building him a habit, the warrant said, wonder in it. The 4 minutes, you've been watching it because a plan you can execute inside a routine the enemy already has, Marsh said, is a plan the enemy helps you run. He steps back from that window every hour on his own. All I'm doing is making sure that on the 1 hour that matters, there's something on the other end of the step. Reeve was quiet a long time. Then he said the question every one of us was thinking. And if the sentry doesn't take the door, if he calls his planner instead. Then we've lost nothing, she said, because we haven't committed a man to the culvert. The culvert is theater. There was never going to be anyone in it. And I try a different seam tomorrow. That's the other half of this work nobody puts in the slides, Colonel. It's patient. It doesn't need to win in one move. It only needs to never make the move that gets them killed. She squared the schematics. Your breach had to be perfect or it was a massacre. My plan can fail all night and cost nothing but my sleep. That's not because I'm braver than your assault element. It's because I'm not betting their lives to prove I'm right. I have carried that sentence for the rest of my career. I'm not betting their lives to prove I'm right. It is the difference between the man I was on that wall at 0340 and the man I have tried to be since. Reeves stood. He looked at the map and at her and at me. Hollies, he said, your element runs the theater at the culvert, loud, convincing, appetite all over your faces, and when the trap doesn't have anyone in it to spring on, you hold. He turned to Marsh. Captain, you have the net, you run it. I want to tell you I took that easily. I didn't. Every cell in me had trained for the door, and I was being told to be a decoy, to be the loud, stupid appetite that the smart plan used as bait. There is a kind of soldier who cannot survive being told his role is to be predictable so that someone cleverer can be the surprise. For about 10 seconds in the blue light of that command post, I was that kind of soldier. Then I looked at Quito's wrapped leg and I thought about the pipe, and I thought about 9 engineers rehearsing their own consolidation drill twice a day behind a frightened man's door, and I let it go. All of it. The appetite, the pride, the 15 years of being the answer. Yes, ma'am, I said, Keystone has the net. And something moved through the room when I said it. The men who had laughed at the scrap end of the table 12 hours ago, straightening, settling, the way an element settles when it finally believes in the plan it's been given. Nobody had ordered them to believe. They just did, because they had watched the same night I had. We set it for the top of the 4th hour before dawn. And then we waited, which is the part they never show you, the long, cold, hollow hours where a plan is just a hope with a schedule, and the only sound is your own gear and your own breathing, and somewhere on the far end of a net, a woman saying almost nothing at all. I ran the theater at the culvert, and I ran it like my life depended on people believing it, which in a way it did. We came down through the tree line loud in all the small ways that read as an assault trying to be quiet and failing, the clink of cutting gear, the scrape of a ladder, the low, urgent shapes of men moving up on a covered approach. I put my best 2 forward to the culvert mouth with a torch and a saw, and told them to make the honest music of men about to breach, and I put the rest of my element in the dead ground behind them looking exactly like a stack waiting to flow. Every motion of it was true assault choreography. That was the point. The planner in that compound had spent 3 days learning what my appetite looked like, and now I fed it to him whole. It worked the way she said it would. I could not see it. But I could hear it come back to me on the net in her voice, flat and precise, narrating a battle I was the bait in. They're moving south, she said. 2 off the North Tower, 2 out of the control house overwatch. That's 4 of their committed men going to your culvert, Hollies. Keep it convincing. Give them 1 more minute of you wanting it very badly. I gave them a man low crawling to the culvert lip with a strap, like we were rigging the grate. Up on the wall I heard a voice bark and another answer, the sound of men repositioning to kill something that was never going to be there. Good, Marsh said. That's their planner committing. He's all in on the drain now. A pause, and for the first time all night I heard the smallest change in her voice, not excitement, nothing so loose as that. Focus, drawing down to a point. North Tower's down to 1. It's the hour, stand by. He's stepping back from the window. Then she stopped talking to us and started talking to him. I did not understand the words. She spoke them low and even into a handset on a frequency her people had watched the faction use, in the sentry's own tongue, and I have since been told by men who did understand that she did not plead and she did not threaten, and she did not promise him mercy from us. She told him something simpler and far harder to refuse. She told him that there was a way for the engineers to live, and that it was the same 4 minutes he already stepped back from the window for, and that all he had to do was what some part of him had clearly been rehearsing for 3 days without admitting it. Open the door he was guarding, walk the people behind it down the north stair and out the postern gate into the dark, and keep walking with them. She told him the door closed when the 4 minutes did. And then she went quiet and let a frightened man stand alone with the first exit anyone had offered him. That was the longest silence of my life, and I was only listening to it. "Come on," I heard Das breathe beside me. "Come on, brother, take the door." On the net, nothing. The culvert torch hissed. My man on the strap held his position, playing at a breach, and I realized I was holding my own breath as if my lungs could reach across the compound and pull. Then marsh very soft, postern gates moving. I have replayed the next 90 seconds more than any 90 seconds of my life. She narrated them for us the way you talk a pilot down through weather, and every word of it was a door held open by will alone. He's got the first 3 out. Engineers, hands visible, moving to the tree line. A beat, 5, 6. He's holding the gate for them. Hollies, keep your culvert loud. Do not let the south element feel the north go quiet. The whole plan is that nobody inside turns around. I gave the culvert a burst of urgent noise, a saw against the old grate, men cursing at a jammed strap. 8, 9. That's all 9 there in the dead ground below the north wall, and the sentries with them. He came out with them. The smallest pause, he came out with them. And then the plan met the thing no plan controls, which is another human being's free choice, because the planner inside that compound was good, and good men check their doors. "Movement on the north stair," Marsh said, and her voice did not rise, but it went very flat and fast. "Their planner's coming back off the culvert to check his sentry. He's going to find the room empty in about 40 seconds. Hollies, now you get loud for real. I need every eye in that compound convinced the breach is happening at the culvert right now. Because in 40 seconds they're going to know they've been emptied out the back. And I need them looking the wrong way for the 90 seconds it takes 9 unarmed people and 1 frightened man to cross open ground to your line." I did not answer with words. I gave her the loudest 40 seconds my element had in it, the culvert lighting up with the full, ugly music of a breach going in, flash and shout, and the deliberate chaos of men committing to a hole in the ground. All of it theater. All of it a lie told at the top of my lungs, so that 9 people I would never meet could run through the dark behind the enemy's turned back. "They're up," Marsh said. "Engineers are up and running for your tree line. Hollies, receive them, receive them." And out of the dark below the north wall they came. I will not forget it. 9 people in the mud-colored clothes of 3 days of captivity, stumbling, holding each other up, herded and steadied by one man with an old rifle slung backward across his spine, so that anyone who saw him would see he was not carrying it to use, the frightened sentry, walking his hostages out of the machine he'd been trapped in, straight into the arms of the element that had spent all night pretending to want to kill him. My men took them in, wrapped them, counted them, pushed them down into the dead ground and back toward the vehicles, and I stood at the edge of the tree line with my ears ringing from my own theater and watched the last engineer come across, an old man in cracked glasses who kept saying a word I didn't know over and over, and I understood without being told that it was "thank you," and that it was not aimed at me. Behind them, inside the compound, I heard the exact moment the planner turned around and found his building empty of everything that had given him power. A single shout, then another, then the particular silence of men who have just discovered that the standoff they were winning ended an hour ago and nobody told them, that the wall they'd held so well was never the thing that mattered, that the water had found the low place and drained out the bottom of their fist while they watched the wrong door. By the time the sun came up over the head of the valley, the Kessel station held nothing but a handful of men with old rifles and no hostages and no reason left to fight, and they gave it up into the light without another shot, because a siege ends when there is nothing left inside worth dying over, and she had quietly carried the only thing worth dying over out the back in the dark. The command post, when we came back down the valley in the gray light, was not celebrating. I have been in the room after a hostage rescue, and it is usually a loud, shaking, half-sick kind of joy, men gripping each other's necks, the pressure of days coming out sideways. This was not that. This was quiet. It was the quiet of a room full of hard men who had all, at the same hour, watched something they did not have it in them to do, done by a person they had all been sure was scenery. 9 engineers alive. 1 faction sentry who'd walked them out, alive, sitting wrapped in a blanket in the corner where Quito had bled the night before, being spoken to gently in his own language by the warrant. 0 of my men lost. 0 rounds fired by us across the whole final act. The loudest we had gotten was a saw against an old grate, a lie made of noise. A 3-day standoff that every instinct in that building had wanted to end with a charge and a stack of flags, ended instead with people walking out of a drain-pipe theater and a held-open gate, and the only casualty on our side, a graze on Quito's calf from the night my breach almost happened. Captain Marsh was at the scrap end of the table again. She had gone back to it. The good chair sat empty at the map where Reeve had pulled it out for her, and she had drifted back down to the coffee ring end where she'd stood when we all decided she was nothing, and she was packing her slim case, laying the soft brown waterworks schematics back in their folds like a person putting tools away after a job, unhurried, already somewhere else in her head, and I understood that this was simply what the end of the work looked like for her. No slide, no flag, just a case closing. Reeve stood at the map, and in front of the whole command post, the warrant, the signalmen, my whole element crowded in muddy and hollow-eyed at the door, Das beside me who 12 hours ago had murmured just another pretty face. Watch, she'll fly home. Colonel Reeve did the thing I did not think a colonel 3 days into a failed siege had left in him. He picked up the breach order off the map table. The 0400 plan. My beautiful plan, the one with my element's name on it. He held it up so the room could see what it was, and he tore it in half cleanly and set the 2 pieces down on the map over the compound where it had almost gotten 9 people killed. For the record, he said, and his voice carried flat and certain to every corner of that room, the ground force commander ordered a breach of the north wall that this officer stopped. Twice. She was right both times. She was right when I didn't want her to be right, and she was right when being right meant standing at the wrong end of my table and taking it from all of us and coming back anyway. He looked at her. I called you a liaison at that door, Captain. I meant something smaller than that by it, and everyone in this room heard what I meant. I'm entering in the log what you actually are. This standoff was ended by the tactical planner running Keystone, and this command post did what she told it to do, and that is the reason 9 people are going home. Nobody moved. Marsh had stopped packing. She stood very still with a folded schematic half in her hands, and for the first time in the whole long night I saw something cross her face, not pride, nothing so easy. Something more like being seen, which I have come to understand is a harder thing to hold than any siege. You don't have to log all that, she said quietly. I know I don't, Reeve said. That's why I'm doing it. And then it happened, the thing I have never been able to describe well to men who weren't there. Nobody called it. There was no order, you cannot order what came next, and Reeve knew it, and he didn't try. Das went first. Das, who told me she'd take notes and fly home. He came to attention at the door in the mud with his rifle slung and his eyes fixed on the woman at the scrap end of the table, and he brought his hand up in a salute so crisp it cracked. And then the man beside him. And then my whole element, one after another down the line, the loud stupid appetite that had spent the night as bait, coming to attention in a wrecked farmhouse for a person they had laughed at across a map, until the entire command post stood silent and saluting the clean uniform at the coffee ring end of the table. I was somewhere in the middle of that line. I don't remember deciding to raise my hand. I remember it already up, the way I remember the pipe already under my men, The way you remember doing the one right thing you didn't have the wisdom to choose and only had the grace to fall into. The command post went silent, not the silence of nothing to say, the silence of a room full of men who had run out of anything worth saying over the sound of their own respect. Marsh looked down the line of us. She did not smile, and she did not stand taller, and she did not do any of the things a smaller person does with a room full of salutes. She set the schematic down, gently, and she came to attention herself, and she returned it, one salute, given back to all of us at once, the way you answer a thing you didn't ask for and won't pretend you didn't earn. At ease, she said softly. Go see your medic, Captain Hollies. Your man's leg needs a proper look. And that was all. She finished packing her case. Somebody found her a coffee. By full light she was gone, back to wherever they keep the people who plan the ends of sieges, the ones you don't hear about, the ones that end with everybody walking out. I have kicked in a great many doors since that valley, and I am good at it still, and I will not pretend the door is not a fine and necessary thing. But I have never again walked into a room and decided that the quiet person at the scrap end of the table, the clean uniform, the one everyone has already written off, is nothing. I go and I find out. Because I stood on a wall in the dark once, certain I was the answer, betting my men's lives to prove I was right. And a woman I'd called Scenery kept every one of them alive without firing a shot, by knowing how water thinks, and by being patient enough to lose all night rather than win once at the wrong cost. They thought she was just another pretty face. I was one of them, and I saluted her in the end, and I have spent the rest of my life trying to earn the right to have been in that line.